my name is Darius White. My students know me as Mr. White. I just want to give you an overview of what's happening tonight. So I want to introduce myself, talk about what the course is, give an overview and what makes this course different. Talk about who will it benefit the most. What will some of the skills be that your kid will obtain as they go through the course, and how will we conduct ourselves and what methods will we use to get through a text for the course called College Prep Reading. And again, I apologize about my voice. So again, my name is Darius White. I'm from the state of Texas. I was privileged enough to get 2 degrees from Stanford University. You can see me in my garbs and robes. I'm a basketball coach, or I was a middle school basketball coach. Now I teach in San Francisco, in the Sunset part of San Francisco at a college prep school, Catholic school. Some of the individuals that you will see in the pictures are Richard Sherman on our left. He's a part of the Seahawks, cornerback. On our right-hand side, you'll see Andrew Luck, football player, quarterback for the Colts. And then the bottom right-hand side, you'll see Brooke Lopez. These are all 3 people I went to school with. No, I was not their best friends, but I knew of them and they knew me. I actually had class with Andrew Luck. I didn't know who he was until I looked on the screen at the end of the year and saw he was being drafted. Richard Sherman lived across the hall from me in my dorm. We shared a lot of elevator time. It was great talking to him. Really, really smart guy, really bright guy. Brooke Lopez, one of my claims to fame at Stanford University is I beat him one-on-one in basketball for some season tickets. Yes, I used to play basketball back in my day. Not much anymore. I'm getting old. So that's a little bit about me. Again, I'm an English teacher in San Francisco. I teach 10th grade and 12th grade English. We're wrapping up our school year right now. My students read a really awesome book called The Hate You Give. And my seniors, it was kind of an independent study, so I let my seniors choose which books they wanted to read in my class. So that's a little bit about myself. Again, I was privileged enough to get 2 degrees from Stanford University, 1 degree in ethnic studies, the other degree in English, and I got my teaching credential from Stanford University, all in 5 years. So go Cardinals. So this course, again, is called College Prep Reading, right? We're really focused on 9th and 10th graders because we're transitioning from the middle school into high school. And yes, there's a big, big, big jump between middle school reading and high school reading in that the texts become a little more rigorous and they become a little more mature. And, also the skills, they build on middle school skills in high school. However, we take it deeper as we get to more sophisticated text, more sophisticated material. So when I think about this course and it being college prep, and let me back up. In middle school, there's a lot of focus on plot and summary in the sense of what's going on between characters, cause and effect, and they barely touch on main idea or themes. Whereas when you get to high school, we're looking a little bit more beyond the text. We're using the same skills from middle school, but we're now adding on inferences and drawing conclusions. Some of this language you'll also hear in your science classes, right? You make observations when you think of the scientific methodology. You make observations, you draw an hypothesis based on some of your observations, and then you go deeper into the text and you start to study to figure out if your hypothesis is correct or not. Some of the major focuses of this class, when I say critical reading, that means your students will be writing in their books, right? Just so they can engage with the text. And I can show you how I do that with my own books. You take a book like Catching the Rye, you can see all my notes. And this is just how I critically engage with the text, right? I know a lot of our young people love Kindle, and I have nothing against electronic copies and digital copies of books, but I think there's something to be said about the old school, smell of a book, writing in it, making some notes. It's just a different feel, than the online version. Also, when we think about analysis, we're talking again, we're looking at those details, we're trying to piece things together, so to speak. Oh, sorry. If you guys can see my notes. This is just kind of how I engage with my text. I require most of my students to do either writing in the book or they get sticky notes. But let's back up for a minute. You're probably still wondering what's the difference between middle school, high school, and college prep reading. So I'm gonna show you a little graphic here. So when you think about reading in middle school, if you look at this base, this is called Bloom's taxonomy. It's not the most perfect diagram of how we learn and how we think. However, it gives you a general gist of how we kind of stack our skills and stack our modes of thinking. So when you think about middle school, we're thinking about remembering and understanding things as in I read the book, I know that this character did this, I know this character's name, you know, very, very much so fact-based. For example, if you read the, you know, you watch a movie, do you know what the characters did? You know, one of the great movies that I want to go see is the Thanos movie with Marvel. And a lot of times we get so caught up on what are the characters doing, we don't ask this question of what, why, what's the character's motive? And so as you move up Bloom's taxonomy to analysis, you're really starting to ask those questions. Oh, Infinity War, thank you. I appreciate it. I was a comic book nerd back in the day. I haven't read comics in a while. My favorite is Wolverine, hands down. Wolverine and Gambit. And my third favorite, I was into Batman for a little bit. I used to love watching Batman back in the 90s, but I digress. So yeah, you think about middle school. We're thinking about summary. We're thinking about cause and effect. We're thinking about plot events. However, when you get to high school, we're really building on that and thinking about analysis, right? When I say analysis, I usually tell my kids it's pretty much taking those details and trying to figure out what do they mean by themselves and what do they mean together. And with analysis that you don't see on this particular diagram of Bloom's taxonomy is inferences, pretty much drawing conclusions. Can you read between the lines? So can you put one and one together to, you know, get two, so to speak? And then when you get to college, college is about being independent, right? There's no one over you. Yeah, you'll have a professor. Yeah, you may have a teacher assistant. However, you're on your own. And so you really gotta have your skills down packed in terms of how do you take notes? How do you take notes about the reading without anyone telling you? I remember my first class at Stanford was Intro to Gender Studies. And I was coming from my college prep school in high school. And, you know, I'm from Texas. And I walk in the first day and everyone has their books. I don't have my books. I'm not prepared. And I'm thinking, whoa, was there some pre-reading to do? Because I didn't do the pre-reading. But I just remember that first week being lost because I was just so used to my teacher telling me what to do in high school or telling me, oh, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas when you get to college, it's really about being independent. And with that, what that means is you got to have your skills. You got to have your own toolbox, your own tool belt to rely on. And so what this course does is kind of help you with the fundamentals as in, you know, summary, analysis, things you'll use in high school, but to take you to that next level, you really got to start evaluating. When I say evaluating, I'm going to be asking you guys, after you read this book, do you think this book should be taught in high school? How do you feel about the author's techniques or their style? Do you think this book is for this audience or that audience? And so really, you're really have to think beyond the text and think about, you know, connect the real world with your perspective and then the author's perspective, as well as in the character development in the book. So it's a couple of things you're juggling as you get to college. You know, again, middle school, do you know what's going on? The basics, the who, what, when, where, right? High school is about the why and the so what. And then college is about all those things plus, you know, evaluating an author's perspective, their craft, their techniques. So that's what I really want to, I hope to, you know, instill in our young people as they go through this course. And I'll tell you a little bit later how this course is different in terms of methodology. You know, I'm kind of an unorthodox teacher in some ways. Some of the books that we could be reading. Primarily, I want to focus on one book, but I want to show you kind of the selection, right? There's a larger collection of high school books that your kids will see. The first three books, I read those when I was in high school, and maybe some of your parents read the books when they were in high school. They're really old books. So you got Catcher in the Rye, you know, classic. These are just two versions of it. What makes this book special, it's about being an outsider and finding your way, right? Some would say it's a coming of age story in terms of maturation and maturing. But what I really like about this book is just a sense of adventure and what is holding the main character get himself into as he's going through New York. So this is Catcher in the Rye. I read this book, you know, I've read this book with my 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders, and my 11th graders. I think you can reread this book plenty of times and find something different to get into. And that's what I mean by being an independent thinker, right? Every time I read this book, I find something new about it, right? And if your parents have read it, they probably remember some of the things. But as you read it, and if some of you have read it, hopefully you'll read it again and think, why did the author do that? It's just like when you watch a movie for the second time, you catch all these details that you didn't catch the first time. So that's Catcher in the Rye, old classic book. I think written in the 1950s, I believe. You have To Kill a Mockingbird. Here's another just cover of it. You see the cover on the screen as well as the cover on the camera. To Kill a Mockingbird, one of the biggest kind of themes or takeaways is just social justice. What does it mean? Morals, ethics. Do you know right from wrong? The book takes place kind of in a segregated time and era. It's a classic book. Again, you can see my notes throughout the book. And yeah, one of the things you'll learn is some of these books are longer than your typical middle school book. So for my 9th and 10th graders, it's time. You guys have to build some reading stamina, right? My kids right now in class read about 45 minutes a night, right? I see them, I have block schedule, of course. I see them 3 times a week, but they're required between 45 to an hour. That's about, depending on how fast you read, anywhere from 30 to about 45 pages. And you got to keep in mind, it takes time to really go through and annotate. And everyone has their own different style of annotation. I just want you to get familiar and comfortable with writing in your book or taking sticky notes as you go through a book, because there's nothing worse than reading a book and then forgetting what you read about and then getting to class and not knowing what's going on. So one of the things that keeps me on task, and it also gets all the ideas out of my head. I don't have to remember all these things. I can just write it down and it's right there in my book. And if a teacher says, oh, I need you to find a quote or source or some part of the book with my notes, I can find that so easily. I can go through the chapters and go, oh, that was a standout quote. That quote may be great for my paper or my essay. So To Kill a Mockingbird, great book about justice and knowing right from wrong, as well as gives you some insight into the segregated times in the South. Really great book, classic book. And then one of my all-time favorites when I was growing up, and I wasn't much of a reader when I was in high school. It's kind of funny now, I'm an English teacher. But one of the books I really, really enjoyed was Fahrenheit 451. Side note, they're actually making an HBO show about it, real people. But this book's really great. It's about, I won't tell you what it's about, but it's kind of a dystopian type of book. Dystopian, kind of like, what is the book called? With Katniss Everdeen. Not To Kill a Mockingbird. What is it called? The Hunger Games. Yeah, that's what it is called. The Hunger Games. Thank you. I appreciate it. The Hunger Games. And as you can see from the title and the book cover, it's about fire. And what happens, if you can see the cover, what happens when you start burning paper. It's a really great book. It really makes you think, could this really happen or not? I read it with my advanced 8th graders, my 10th graders. Yes, thank you, Hunger Games. It's a really, really fast-flowing book, but there's a lot of content. As you can see, the books range in different page numbers, and they talk about different topics, obviously. And one of the things as you read is that stamina. And stamina doesn't always mean the page numbers, but just can you get through a dense text? So you look at a book like Catcher in the Rye, the way the style is written, it's pretty free-flowing. It's kind of from a first-person narrative point of view. So you get into the mind of Holden Caulfield, the main character. With To Kill a Mockingbird, it's third person. It's a little bit more dense, a lot more plot heavy, but really makes you think about the characters and why they do what they do. And then again, one of my favorites. And then one of the newer books, I call it a new classic. I got introduced to this book maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It's called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. It's about a kid who has, I believe, Asperger's. He's on the autistic scale. And I think it's a really great book because you don't hear from that point of view. You typically hear from, a male figure or characters that we tend to see in a lot of our movies that we see, But this book gives you insight into another identity, right? Someone who has Asperger's, and you really get to learn about what does it mean to be inclusive and to be empathetic, right? Because we don't hear a lot from, we don't read a lot of books from different points of views. So I think this is a great book to just give you another insight into someone else's experience. And you're probably wondering what's up with the upside down dog or the dog on the cover. I won't give it away. I'll just say it's a new classic. So these are just some of the books that we can choose from. We're not reading all 4, so don't worry. We're just picking one book right? I'd rather read one book and go in depth as opposed to reading 20 books and we go very shallow and it doesn't go anywhere, right? So this is the new class, again, The Curious Incident of the Dog. So those are some of the books I will be reading. And as you can see, the first 3 books, you'll definitely see in a high school curriculum. Hands down, you can go from, I don't care where you are in the United States, you will find these 3 books. They'll be written at different times. Some teachers see To Kill a Mockingbird as a freshman book. Some people see it as a junior book. Some people see Catching the Rye as a 9th grade book. Some people see Fahrenheit 451 through all the grades as far as high school goes. What makes the books different for different grades is just the types of questions that students will bring up, right? And I'll get into this a little bit later, but the way I teach, I don't want to give you the answers. It's not about me. It's about your interpretation of the book. I'm just here as a coach or a guide. I think of myself as Steve Kerr if you're a Warriors fan, right? You have to be Steph Curry. You have to be KD. You have to be Klay Thompson. You know, side note, I kind of hope the Cavs win. I just want to see LeBron win another one, you know? So we move. Come on, it's LeBron James. I'm not the biggest LeBron James fan. I'm an Allen Iverson fan. I was a basketball player that was under 6 foot, you know, so could I dunk? Yes. Did I dunk on anyone when I was in high school? No. Nowadays, can I dunk? I probably can't even touch the rim on a good day. So yeah, what's the benefits of this class, right? Why? Why are we here? Why are we going to go through so many weeks with a book? So a couple of things that I hope your young people take away. Again, as I said, taking notes in your books, pivotal, critical skill. It's one of those things that most kids don't do. And if you don't do it in college, you'll get lost in the sauce, as I tell my young people. The only way to not get lost in the sauce is to make sure, you know, you have notes in your book, you know. And the notes don't have to be super detailed. They're just kind of like, you know, for me, I wrote on this page, Mad Dog Loose, or sometimes I'll draw doodles for all my image and visual learners. I love to draw. I can't draw, but I love to draw my books and doodle. As I said before, being an independent thinker. I think a lot of times in high school, our teachers tell us what to believe that we stop reading. So we almost just wait for the teacher to tell us what to read. You know, well, if I don't read tonight, the teacher will just tell me the next day. Not the case here. If you don't read, we will know through discussion, okay? You don't want to get exposed. So you want to do your reading, of course. And they're really fun books. You can look up and finish a book in 2 days if you're really into a book. Like I said before, in middle school, we're looking at cause and effect. These things will come up in the class because we'll start with what's happening in the text, and then we'll eventually start to branch out and zoom out and think about what's happening beyond the text and in the real world, and how does this book kind of dialogue or speak to what's happening in the world today. Excuse me. Yeah, my voice is a little hoarse because I went to a graduation and I lost my voice during a graduation. Drawing inferences, AKA conclusions, right? Can you read between the lines? As I tell my young people now, there's things that are happening on the surface that we see, and there's things that happen behind the scenes or below the surface, things that we don't see, but we have to think about by using things that we see. Pretty much using your observations and drawing a conclusion based on your observations. In English, you know, we call observations evidence. So citing evidence, which may mean pulling up a quote, taking a section out of a book, or rereading this section to understand a theme or a main idea or a message embedded in the book. Because if you're a really good writer, you're not going to tell your readers what to believe up front. You know, they don't tell us when we watch Infinity Wars, this is what you should believe, right? You watch it and you leave with discussion. Did anybody see Black Panther? Anybody see Black Panther? You know, one of the hands down best films. And the comic book is even better. If you ever get to read the comic book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, go read the comic book. It's even better than the actual movie. But I don't know if you got to read some of the commentary on Black Panther, but people took it everywhere. They're like, oh my God, this is so futuristic. You know, we got to get vibranium. You know, that's what a great text will do for you. It'll make you have these great discussions, and you'll think about the movie, and then you'll want to rewatch it, right? I want to go back and rewatch the movie. I've only watched it once. I had a really great discussion with my kids, by the way, in class, and talking about, is this the best Marvel movie ever? It's one of my favorites, but do I think it's the best? No, I think one of the Iron Mans is probably the best. I can't think of which one, but one of the Iron Man movies are probably the best in terms of plot and just overall action. And I see people chiming in on the chat. Back to the slide. Also, with inferences, telling the difference, as I said, between what's happening, what you see, and then what's happening be off screen, right? Really using your noggin to think about, why did that character do this? Why did the author put this character in the book? So you think about Black Panther again, Killmonger. Why would the director put in Killmonger? Why did it have to be somebody from Wakanda to be the evil villain? Why wasn't that some alien force? And that's a great question. Or, if we have vibranium, could vibranium do everything? One of the plot holes I think in Black Panther is, how can vibranium do everything? Everything. It pretty much drives cars. It's used for the internet. It's used for shields. It's used for everything. I don't think any chemical or any material can do everything. Yeah, and as we move further up, I see the chats are coming in. People are wondering, comic book logic is off. You're right. I see people are coming in on the chat and saying, well, that's just kind of how comic books are. Sure, we can argue about it later. So analysis, again, taking those details and asking yourself, what's the big deal with this detail, right? Why would this character do this? How does this character interact with other people? And lastly, one of the main things, we'll talk offline about Black Panther. One of the last things, and this is what separates high school from college, or college from high school, I should say, is the evaluation, right? If you think about the very tip of the Bloom's taxonomy, and let me take you back to that shot. If you think about the very top, we're not creating anything. I would love to see you guys write a book, but we're not going to create any books in this class, at least not yet. But evaluation and having a point of view and justifying it. So if you evaluate something, you're going to have a point of view. You think about the lower end skills. You have to, justify with evidence from the text. Right? So you can see how those skills kind of stack with each other to get you to evaluation. So evaluation is critical in college because it's rare when a teacher will tell you what to believe, and it's rare when a teacher will tell you how to read a book. That's why you got to annotate. You got to ask those questions, which leads me into my next slide. How will we conduct ourselves in this course? I don't believe in lectures, so to speak. Yes, I will talk, but I would love to hear you guys talk. I would love to hear you bring in your questions. So I try to do some student-led discussions, and it's a little difficult because we're online, but I think it's definitely possible because I think you guys bring as much knowledge to the text as I do, right? I only bring a certain perspective, right? As an old man from Texas, whereas you guys are young, you have the internet, you bring all these different perspectives and ideas, which means too, as you can see, I love talking about other things beyond just reading, textbooks and books. I love comics, I love poetry, I love watching movies, I love music. So feel free, I always ask my students, as they start reading the book and they get really engrossed in the characters and immersed in the plot, it may remind them of something else. I'm from Dallas, so I'm not a Houston Rockets fan. I'm not a Dallas Mavericks fan. I'm a Cowboy fan. Not a Tony Romo fan, but a Cowboy fan. So if at any time a student is reading something that says, oh, Mr. White, this reminds me of this news article, or this reminds me of this book, feel free to bring it into class. I think it makes for a richer discussion because I'll bring in stuff just so you guys can see what are the connections between the text we're reading, the main text, the core text, and other articles. You think about, Fahrenheit 451, how are we moving? You ask this question of, are we going to live in a world where we don't read books anymore and we just download, we just put a chip in our arm and boom, there it is, right? I say that because, if you have a dog in some parts of the world, you can put a scanner in your dog's fur and you can scan your dog, which is crazy, right? It's really futuristic. I couldn't imagine just downloading a book. I would hope that we still read books in 30, 40, 50, 100 years. But, asking those kind of big questions and thinking about, well, where are we seeing these ideas play out before in the real world? And last, the way I approach classes through visuals. I usually have a slideshow. I love my GIFs or my GIFs, however the young people say it. But learning through pictures. I'm a very visual learner. So yeah, these books do not have photos. They have only covers and that's it. However, I'll bring in some visuals just so we can kind of play the movie or have a mental motion picture in our head as we read the book. I found that to be a really important resource for me is having pictures. Because when I was reading in high school, it was hard for me to read the book, understand what's going on, and then try to maintain the plot in my head. So what I end up doing is just writing in my book and just drawing pictures in my book, just so I can have a sense of what a character may look like. You know, what does the bad guy or the good guy or the female protagonist look like? And just so I can keep that motion picture in my head playing. Because, sometimes some books are so dense, you can get lost in the words. So that's why it's important to stop, pause, draw, write, doodle in your book. I know a lot of parents are like, no, I would never let my kid doodle in the book, but it's a really, really important skill. And I'm a very big proponent and advocate of your kid writing in a book that is theirs. Not a library book, but a book that they can call their own. So those are kind of the ways I approach the class. So discussion based. So I'll be asking kids to read and also, bring in questions to talk about. We'll look at some other texts. So when I say text, I can mean YouTube videos, articles, maybe excerpts from other books, just to kind of give us variety to contextualize and to understand the main text. And then lastly, pictures are important. So if there's any point you want to bring in an image, feel free to send me an image. Do I recommend watching a movie? Sometimes the movie doesn't do justice. So I think about the Harry Potter books, and I was never a Harry Potter fan, but I enjoyed the visuals of the book, that being the motion picture, but I don't know if the movie captured everything in the book. And that's hard for a book to do that. You see someone's raised their hand. Sorry, I couldn't get to you with your raised hands. So to answer your question about should I watch the movie, it's up to you. I think some of us need the context. We need something before we read the book. So then as we read the book, we can think, oh, I watched this already. Whereas some of us, we like to, maintain some discovery, read the book, and then watch the movie and think, oh, now I can see between the book and the movie. Personally, it depends on the book. Sometimes I'll watch the movie and then I'll read the comic. Or I'll, for example, The Walking Dead. I read the comics off and on. I didn't like the style of the comic, so I watched the movie or watched the shows, and then I went back and forth between the comic and the shows. But it's all a resource. It's all different resources. Some of us like to read a little bit of Spark Notes before we read, and I know this is something that teachers never say, but I'm a very big proponent of Spark Notes just to kind of help me understand the book, because Spark Notes is going to give you the plot. Yeah, you can look up themes and certain topics, sure, but there's nothing like reading the book and already kind of having a sense of where you're going, just in case you're a kid who struggles with reading comprehension. Whereas if you're a kid who can read and hold all that information in your head, great. But I think it is great to use all your resources as you read a book. It just makes you a better reader. It's like using all the tools at your disposal. And yeah, that may mean online. Oh, it's okay. It's okay, Jenny, if you raise your hand. I appreciate you raising your hand. Some frequently asked questions. Do we have homework? Yeah, you're going to be reading. And they're good books. They're fun books. They're not the dry, drab books. So yeah, you'll be reading. I hope to meet with you maybe 2 to 3 times a week for class. You'll be reading about, again, 30 to 45 pages, depending on which book we select. You think about To Kill a Mockingbird. It is about 320 pages, right? So don't fret, don't worry. You're just reading and taking notes, right? We won't be doing any extreme writing. I'll ask you some questions and we may do a little bit of quick writing just to get our ideas out before we start talking. Yeah, as I said, we're reading one book. I just wanted to show you the variety that I'm choosing from because they're classic books and they're fun books. Will there be other readings? Yeah, I may ask you to read an article in class. I may say, hey, let's pull up, I have an article from the New York Times or The Economist, let's read it. Just so you can, start to build some other skills with different reading genres, right? Because reading a literature book is different from reading a textbook, which is different from reading a news article, right? There are different types of reading. However, you can still use similar skills, but, different goals for different types of text and different methods for getting through different types of text. Will we be expected to write? You'll be writing a little bit. This isn't a writing course per se, but you will put pen to paper or you will type just to kind of brainstorm, maybe be bullet points. It may mean drawing something out and just showing us kind of your brainstorm. So that's the extent of the writing. I may ask you to, formulate a thesis just to see kind of how are you understanding the book. Some other questions that have come up. How do you, these are more kind of detailed questions, more specific. How do you identify important keywords in the article quickly? So if you're reading an article, you want to read, you want to use all your resources. So you want to read the title, subtitle. If it's a news article, I'll tell the kids to read the first paragraph and the last paragraph, just to kind of see if the author gives you the main idea up front. Just like when you're writing your essay, you have a thesis statement, you have a claim that you make in the beginning, and then at the very end in your conclusion, excuse me for my voice, you reiterate or restate that thesis or argument or stance. As I said earlier, again, what makes this class different from your middle and high school is I'm really pushing you guys to formulate your own thoughts, right? I don't have the answers. If anything, I have a lot more questions than I do ideas. That doesn't mean I'm going to abandon you. No, I will support you, but I really hope that you bring your own questions, your own knowledge, your own artwork, your own visuals, your own understandings, your own skills to a reading. That's what makes a great class, when kids can talk and converse and kind of share perspectives and stories. So what are some reading strategies for understanding the author's main point? As I said before, depending on the type of literature. So if you're reading a book, a novel, you're gonna have to just read the book. Whereas if you're reading a textbook, your history textbooks or your science textbooks, a lot of textbooks will have summaries at the back of a chapter. So I usually tell kids to read the summary first and then go and start reading the chapter, just so you know what you're getting into. And it also helps for SAT, reading the questions first, and then you'll start reading the actual text. So when you're reading the text, you'll know kind of what you're looking for, and you're not going into the text without any purpose. What are some key factors that can enhance your ability for critical reading? First and foremost, just finding something you're excited about reading, right? I wasn't the strongest reader in high school, and you're probably wondering, how did you get into college? I was an effective reader, but I didn't love reading. Meaning I used all my strategies that I learned in class. However, now as an English teacher, I love reading. I go to the library every week. I just went maybe 2 or 3 hours before. I picked up a comic book called Tank Girl. I hope to find more of the Black Panther books in the Oakland Library. So, first and foremost, it's about finding stuff you're into. Because I know sometimes you'll read books in high school that aren't that exciting. That's why you have to balance it out with something you love to read for leisure. So if you're into gaming, read some sci-fi books. If you're into, music, read music articles, magazines. And when I say articles, read things that are online, read some print articles, just get a variety. That's what I always tell my kids. It's just about a variety. Early on in high school, middle school, and early college, it's just about exposure. When you become a junior and senior in college, you get really specific, you get really determined. Right, you start with your basics, and then you say, "Oh, I want to be a mechanical engineering in this specific field." When you're a junior, senior, but from 6th grade all the way through maybe sophomore year in college, it's just about exposure, just seeing different things. Right, like I didn't know that I would be into what's the last great book that's shocked me. Well, I'm reading these psychology books and studying people and understanding how do people learn. Because, I think about, how did we learn to read? Or how did we learn to tie our shoe, right? What's happening in our brains? And so that kind of shocked me to think about, why do we do what we do? So again, for enhancing your reading abilities, it's just like anything, whether you're an athlete, it's about, studying other successful people and learning strategies from them. If you're a basketball player, studying Steph Curry's step back shot, or, Kyrie Irving's finishing at the basket. It's about seeing their strategies and then practicing and building that stamina and muscle memory. And when I say muscle memory in English class, muscle memory looks like annotating your text, asking good questions, conversing with other people, things that should just become second nature as you do it over and over and over and over. So those are some of the big questions. I'm going to open it up now for Q&A. So feel free to type me a question if you have one about this course. Again, I'm Mr. White, and the name of the course is College Prep Reading. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Are there any questions? No questions out there? Any questions from the parents? well, I'll ask this question, and feel free to type it in. From the books that you saw on the screen, which books look interesting to you? What book are we going to read? So we have some questions. I'm going to answer these live right now. Some people are saying Catcher in the Rye, classic book. Someone says I vote Doggy. Some people say Fahrenheit. Personally, if I could choose, I think Fahrenheit 451 is great because they also have the show. And the show's on HBO. We can't watch the show, obviously, but people did some really cool renditions of the book online on YouTube. I would say if I had to choose, it would be between, it's tough. It's tough. I'll be honest, I've only read this once. I haven't read it. Well, I guess I've read it a couple of times, but I'm not an expert in this book just yet. I think there's so much to dive into this book. Whereas this book, I read it when I was in high school, middle school. I feel like I just kept reading these books, and I found something new as I got older and older. And there's nothing wrong with reading books, rereading books. So maybe we'll all kind of explore this book together again. For me, maybe I'll catch something different in this book. Someone asks, "Is annotating help?" To each his own. I think we don't, as teachers, we don't require kids a lot, and so you don't really think that it's important. But I annotate a lot in my books. Actually, if you give me 1 second, I have a ton of my library books, and I can show you just kind of the notes I take in my books now as an adult. Yeah. Here we go. So these are just books I'm reading, leisurely, and also for my seniors. There's this book, and I just want you to pay attention to my notes. Do I sit down and read every single book every single day? No. I'll read maybe 10 minutes of this book, get through 5 or 10 pages, stop, take a break, wash dishes, dance, and then, I'll go outside and read another book. You see my notes. So yeah, I think annotation is important because it helps you get all your ideas out on paper, right? I know I'm not the most organized person in my head, so I have to get it down on paper. So I think it does help to do a little bit of annotating. Or if you don't like writing in books, I think just having sticky notes so you can kind of get to the important pages a little bit faster. What's the most times I reread a book? What's one of the books I read over and over and over? I'm looking at my library, so excuse me, I'm looking at my library shelf right now. I'll say this. Where is it? One of my all-time favorite books that I can read anytime, and this doesn't have to do anything with college prep, but Shel Silverstein. I read this book, when I was in second grade, I believe, all the way to, I remember the day, maybe a week or so before I graduated in college, I read this book outside, just in the quadrant of Stanford University under a palm tree. So I probably read this book at least 100 times. It's a poetry book, it's a children's book, but they're really fun little poems. What is it called? This book is called Where the Sidewalk Ends, if that's what you want to know. Other questions? And no, I'm not going to talk about the basketball game, guys. That's for another. When we meet during the summer, we can unpack all of the mistakes that J.R. Smith's made. Other questions that you guys have about the class, obviously, or about reading in general? All right, let's see what we have. Will we be assessed? Yeah, you have assessments. They'll range. And I think you're probably thinking of like tests. Yeah, there'll be some, just to make sure you're reading. Also, we'll do assessments just based on your discussion, right? We can all tell if someone's done the reading. If they don't have anything to say in class, they probably didn't do the reading. But there will be some minor assessments, as well as through some of your writing, I'll get a sense of kind of what's going through your head as you're reading the book. Should we all get all? No, do not get all the books. I think right now, TBD in terms of what book we're going to choose. A lot of us are thinking this book because, you know, it's a book that I'm interested in learning more about. Whereas some of us are kind of feeling this book because of the, the idea of burning things. It's a dystopian society. So hold off on books. But feel free to look on Amazon just to kind of, if you want to read some reviews of the book, that's fine. Because we're only reading one book, So I just wanted to show you the variety, kind of, just so you can see, oh, I've seen that book, or I've heard about that book. Have you read The Land of Stories? No. One of the great things about being a teacher is you're always reading. I know that's a scary thing to say, but you're always reading new books. It feels like there's a book that comes out every day. I remember the first year of teaching, which was maybe 10 or 11, 12, I don't know how many years ago, 12, maybe a decade ago. I remember going to the bookstore and just being overwhelmed and thinking, I'm not a real English teacher because I haven't read all these books. But, books are made. Everyone's writing books. You're going to write a book one day and I'll read it, right? So I haven't read a lot of these books that you guys are showing me on the screen. I'll make note of it. I'll bring it to I'll start to look into them. So thank you for recommending books. Other questions? So again, do not get all the books. Mr. Chin, you got your hand raised. And no, I have not read I have not read False Prince. Sounds good. Other questions? It's okay if you raise your hand. That just means you're engaged. Other questions? So I'm excited about this class because one of the features in my day school class is it's just a lot of discussion. We make some artwork from time to time, just to kind of give us visuals for a book. So for example, we did a picture book of what was the book called? Othello. I don't know if some of you've heard of Othello, Shakespeare's Othello. Hold on. Someone says, what if we've already read the book we select? That's fine. I think rereading it will make for better questions, right? Because I think by you coming up with the questions, right, as opposed to just reading Spark Notes, you get a different understanding of the book, right? That actually puts you in a really good position, right? Not better or worse, but a good position to understand a book deeper, right? I can ask, I don't have to ask you plot questions since you've already read it. I can really ask you about the author's choice. Do you think this character was effective? Do you think this character was important? I think about Harry Potter. I just didn't understand the character of Ron Weasley. I get it. He's a friend. He's comical relief, but I really wish Hermione got her own movie. Hands down. Yeah, Harry's important, but Hermione's the best wizard. Strong, smart. She's an important character. Asking that question of why would the author put in Ron? Other questions. Hermione is weird, but she's strong and smart, right? If you had to choose your team of wizards, would you choose Hermione or Ron? Be honest with yourself. Other questions. And I can't open a discussion on Harry Potter, sorry. Oh, yes, I understand a foil. I appreciate you using the English terms. You're right, a foil. Other questions? Ron's just a foil character. You can say that. What's my favorite genre of? That's tough. I think as I've aged and went through my different stages in my life, different books have stuck out to me. At one point in time, I wanted to read about sports psychology and understanding, Mamba mentality if you're Kobe Bryant. And that was when I was in high school because I thought I was going to play D1 basketball at Duke. That didn't come true. I was 5'11", 115 pounds on varsity, maybe eighth or ninth man off the bench. So I got in literally for all of 2 minutes every game. Whereas in freshman year, I skipped freshman year basketball and got moved to JV. I started on JV. And then varsity, everyone just got exponentially taller than I did. And I stopped growing in 10th grade. But I was into reading books about just the psychology and the mindset of a star athlete. You know, how does LeBron James put up 50 points? You know, even if he has kind of a bonehead, you know, teammate sometimes. Should this be the right class if I'm in the 7th grade? That's a good question. If you're up for the challenge, I will say maybe not, depending on the book. Some of the books are a little bit more mature. You know, I think about To Kill a Mockingbird. There are some ideas that are kind of heavy, but I think that's up to your family's discretion in terms of the books. That's why I say, you know, check out Amazon, read some reviews. But these books are more so high school in terms of just some certain ideas. Any good adventure action books? Off the top of my head, some action books. I got to table that question. A lot of the books that are coming up in my head are more so about characters and their kind of weird personalities, and less so about action packed. But I mean, The Hunger Games is obvious. That's got some action in it. I don't know. I have to get back to you on that question in terms of really good action books. Other questions? I don't think we have much longer, but any other questions about the class? Books that I recommend over the summer. Depending on your age, The Sympathizer just won an award. I forget the author's name. I believe he's an Asian gentleman. He wrote this book called The Sympathizer, a really good book. If you want more classic books, you know, there's the obvious, you know, Romeo and Juliet. You know, I love watching the movie. Romeo and Juliet is probably one of my favorite Shakespeare, and I'm not the biggest Shakespeare fan. I don't think he's the best writer ever, but I think some of his books are creative. Some of his plays are really creative. Someone said Cherub or Lockwood and Company. Okay. As far as for action, I appreciate you, Annie Lee. Divergent. Oh, I haven't gotten through those books. I've heard great things about Divergent. Those are stellar books. Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind's okay. It's classic. It's a classic book. You'll see, but it's okay. Shield of Stars. Shania. I hope I'm saying that properly. Shield of Stars. That sounds interesting. Would you type me a line about? Just give me a gist of what that book may be about. That may be a good thing to do, guys, to think about making a book list of just action books that we all enjoy and then kind of putting it out there for everybody. This is what I mean by, you know, students collaborating with the teacher and really putting forth what they've read. Because who knows, you may introduce me or your classmates to a really great book. So I'll think about that. I'll keep a list of your books going. If you guys enjoy Shakespeare, The Tempest or Midsummer Night's Dream. Yeah, Midsummer Night's Dream is a classic. Other questions, ladies and gents? As we kind of wrap up here. Any questions about the class? I hope I was clear in explaining what we'll be doing this summer. What makes a classic book classic? You know, wonderful question. Annie Lee, that's the type of question I'm looking for in class. That's what I mean by going, you know, above and beyond, right? Because when you think about a classic, you got to ask, who is telling you it's a classic? Is it a classic because a lot of people like it? Is it a classic because it's old? That's a wonderful question. I think when I think of classic, I think a lot of different things. I think some new books are classic because I think they'll be read forever, right? It's just like with music. You know, how do you know something's a classic artist or a classic, you know, album? I think it depends on, does it stand the test of time? Will it be something you'll read in 20 years, something you'll read or listen to in 30 years? So what makes a book classic in the English world, as far as teaching goes, it's usually books that are older and books that have been reviewed a lot. However, I think there are a lot of wonderful texts out there that don't get the same level of spotlighting because of, a lot of different reasons. It gets really political, but I think there are a lot of wonderful books out there. They're just waiting for their time to shine. And they're not necessarily in every English curriculum that we see in K through 12 schooling, but that's one of my goals. That's why I keep reading. And I love the recommendation you guys are giving me, because I can hopefully incorporate some of these books with you guys as well as with my day school kids. So I think that's what reading is about. No, I don't play Fortnite. No. I'm not a gamer. Sorry. The last game I played was, I think, EA Sports Basketball. That was like the rival to 2K. StarCraft. I mean, I think I know Minecraft. It's not the one with the boxes and little, I don't know. So I'm gonna close it down, ladies and gents. I appreciate you guys. Again, my name is Darius White, aka Mr. White. I appreciate your engagement tonight. I look forward to meeting you all. Finish strong with your finals if you're at the end of class. And I look forward to hearing from you.